It's been said great things come from humble beginnings. In the case of Dr. Mark Dedomenico, his list of accomplishments seem improbable considering Mark's scholastic beginnings were hampered by dyslexia. Fortunately, Mark had learned to depend on his visual and hearing skills to make up for his disability by the time he reached medical school in St. Louis. Back in Seattle for his internship and residency, Mark's career was interrupted when the Vietnam War took him to Chau Ly, Da Nang, and a hospital ship, the Repose, where the trauma was intense. It was in this crisis mode that Mark realized he was only one link in a medical chain, whereas, with his aptitude for research and motivation, Mark's goal was to help millions instead of one patient at a time. After the war, that motivation led him to Dr. Lester Savage to research curative methods for heart disease. In 1963, Dr. Savage believed a partially blocked coronary artery could be bypassed using a neck vein. The problem was that when the thin external jugular vein was placed in the arterial system with its high blood pressures, it would dilate too much. Nevertheless, Lester Savage presented his work at the American Thoracic Surgery Conference, where reaction among thoracic surgeons was largely negative. Mark pondered better ways to complete the process and realized he needed a stronger vein. In Vietnam, he used a piece of saphenous vein to patch a hole in an artery. Now he wondered if the saphenous vein was stronger than a neck vein. And he sought out saphenous veins from the hospital pathologist and immediately found that they were 12 times thicker than the neck vein of a dog. When tested under arterial pressures of 120/80 to 160/100, the saphenous veins didn't dilate. Mark included these facts in his paper on the coronary bypass, and as a result, his work helped millions of cardiac patients. Mark's paper also opened the door to other procedures, including coronary dilators, coronary stents, and the use of chest wall arteries for delivering blood to a patient's coronary arteries. In the meantime, Lester Savage and two engineers from Seattle University worked to define a new hydraulic engineering called pulsative flow engineering, the study of blood flow through the heart and vessels, which led to the creation of the guided flow aortic valve, invented and tested by Lester and Mark, and used successfully for aortic valve replacement for 10 years around the world. Also around that time, Dr. Sigmund Wesolowski developed a knitted tube, which Lester and Mark believed to be the perfect arterial graft because knitting leaves small holes, and they thought that through these holes a new artery might grow. A woman in her late 60s needed an artery replacement for one of the main arteries supplying her bowel, but she lacked any good replacement veins. When her care was transferred to Dr. Savage and Dr. Dedomenico, lacking an alternative, they used the new experimental arterial graft, and the patient lived over 20 years and died of old age. That arterial graft became known as the Barre arterial prosthesis and is still used around the world every day. With the bypass, heart valve, and arterial prosthesis work being completed, you would think funding for the research center would have become easier. In fact, the opposite happened, and for Mark and Lester, raising money became more difficult. So Mark turned his attention to building an influential, affluent board of directors, while Lester, Mark, and Mark's family company, Golden Grain, helped fund the research center from their own money. One day, when Mark went to his father, Paskey Dedomenico, for more funding, Paskey asked Mark to join Paskey's company, the Golden Grain Macaroni Company, makers of Rice-a-Roni, because sales were stagnating for several years. So Mark set out to retool Golden Grain and recreate relationships with grocery chains, even while continuing to give research input to the Heart Research Center. Mark created a new board of directors, developed a fundraising department, and spearheaded changing the name of the research center from the Reconstructive Cardiovascular Research Center to the Hope Heart Institute. Meanwhile, the Golden Grain Company grew tenfold to $250 million in sales and was sold to Quaker Oats. The sale of the company allowed Mark to further pursue his dedication to cardiac research and funding. While Mark continued working with the Hope Heart Institute, he visualized programs to prevent people from ever needing cardiovascular surgery. His vision led directly to the development of 2020 LifeStyles, which researched ways to treat metabolic disorders of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, disorders that caused heart disease. Currently, Dr. Dedomenico's 2020 LifeStyles research project is in its 21st year, with 160 employees and 9,000 success stories, demonstrating that cardiovascular risk can be reversed without drugs, using diet, exercise, and lifestyle changes. Furthermore, Mark's results with obesity are tenfold better than anywhere in the world. Literally millions around the planet have benefited from Mark's development of the coronary bypass, the guided flow aortic valve, the Barre arterial prosthesis, 2020 LifeStyles, and his other research preventing or repairing disorders of aging. In retrospect, Mark's revelation in Vietnam that he wanted to help many rather than one patient at a time had a huge impact. His role as educator and mentor affected hundreds of careers.